The Catherian Empire had ruled the Andromeda Spiral for over 3,000 cycles. Their blue-scaled admirals commanded fleets that could crack planets, their crystal technology-powered cities that floated in the void, and their diplomatic corps had forged alliances with hundreds of species across dozens of star systems. Yet today, Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, watching his empire's greatest fleet prepare for what might be their final battle. "Status report," Zethkar commanded, his gills fluttering with barely contained anxiety. The bridge around him buzzed with activity as his crew worked frantically at their stations. Holographic displays showed tactical information, fleet positions, and worst of all, the approaching enemy armada. "Sir, our scout ships report the Vex High Collective's main battle group is 3 hours out," reported Lieutenant Yixtal, her tentacles dancing across her control console. "Current count shows 437 capital ships, over 2,000 support vessels, and an estimated 50,000 fighter craft." Zethkar's scales darkened to a deep navy blue, a sure sign of stress among his people. The Vex High had been the Catherian Empire's greatest rival for centuries, but this was different. This was an all-out assault meant to end their civilization once and for all. "What about our own forces?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would not be encouraging. "We have 215 capital ships ready for engagement, 800 support vessels. And 22,000 fighters," came the reply from his tactical officer. "The defense platforms around Kither Prime are fully operational, but, sir," the officer hesitated. "Speak freely. Even with our planetary defenses, we're outnumbered more than 2 to 1. The Vex High have brought their entire military force. Every ship they have is heading straight for our homeworld." Zethkar moved to the main viewing port and stared out at the stars. Kither Prime hung below them, a beautiful blue-green world where billions of his people lived their lives, unaware that in just a few hours, everything they knew might be destroyed. The planet's 3 moons were covered with military installations, and space around the world crawled with defensive satellites and weapon platforms. But would it be enough? "Sir, incoming transmission from the High Council," announced the communications officer. "Put them through." The air above Zethkar shimmered, and the holographic forms of the 12 High Counselors appeared. At their center stood Grand Counselor Velthara, her ancient scales bearing the scars of countless battles from her younger days as a warrior. "Admiral Zethkar," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority and desperation, "what is your assessment of our situation?" "Grave, Counselor. The Vex High have committed everything to this attack. They mean to end us here and now." "And can we stop them?" Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. As a military commander, he had sworn an oath to protect the Empire, but that same oath demanded honesty with his leaders. "I do not know. We will fight with everything we have, but the numbers are against us." Counselor Velthara nodded slowly. "We have sent messages to all our allies, calling in every favor, every treaty obligation. The Zilarian Federation is sending what ships they can spare, but they won't arrive in time. The Molten clans are too far away. The Crystal Singers refuse to leave their home systems undefended. What about the Nurathi? They have the closest fleets to our position. The Nurathi High Command claims their ships are engaged in critical defensive operations and cannot assist." The bitterness in Velthara's voice was unmistakable. "It seems when our allies smell weakness, they become very creative in finding excuses." Zethkar felt his heart sink. The Catherian Empire had spent centuries building relationships, offering aid and protection to smaller species, mediating disputes, and maintaining peace across their section of the galaxy. Now, when they needed help most, they stood alone. "There is one more thing," Velthara continued. "Our long-range sensors have detected something unusual at the edge of the system. Unknown ships, small in number but giving off energy signatures we've never seen before. They appeared just as the Vex High fleet entered our outer detection grid. Unknown ships? What species? That's just it. We don't know. They don't match any ship design in our databases. The energy patterns are completely foreign. They've ignored all our attempts at communication. Zethkar frowned. The last thing they needed right now was another unknown factor in an already impossible situation. How many ships? 12 vessels. Very small compared to our standards. But they're maintaining position just outside the main battle zone. Our analysts think they might be observers, perhaps from some distant species come to watch the fall of our empire. Or scavengers, muttered Zethkar, waiting to pick through the wreckage after we're all dead. Perhaps. But Admiral, focus on what you can control. You are the finest naval commander our people have ever produced. If anyone can find a way to save our world, it is you. The connection ended, leaving Zethkar alone with his thoughts and his impossible task. Around him, his bridge crew continued their preparations. Weapon systems were charged to full power, shield generators hummed with barely contained energy, and fighter pilots ran through final pre-flight checks. "Sir, the Vex High fleet has entered the outer system," reported his sensor operator. "They're maintaining formation, moving at steady acceleration toward Kither Prime. At current speed, they'll be in weapons range in 2 hours and 47 minutes. Zethkar activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Admiral Zethkar. In less than 3 hours, we will face the greatest threat our empire has ever known. The Vex High come not for conquest, but for extermination. They seek to erase our people from the galaxy, to claim our worlds for their own, and to destroy everything our ancestors built over 3 millennia. He paused, looking around at his crew. These were good people, loyal servants of the Empire who deserved better than to die in a hopeless battle. But they were Kitherian, and Kitherians did not surrender. We stand alone, but we do not stand without purpose. Behind us is our homeworld, our families, our future. Before us is an enemy that believes our time has passed. Today we will show them that the Kitherian Empire does not go quietly into extinction. Today we fight not just for victory, but for the right to exist. All stations prepare for battle." Across the fleet, similar speeches were being given on hundreds of ships. Kitherian commanders rallied their crews, preparing them for what everyone knew would be a desperate fight. In the fighter bays, pilots kissed holographic images of loved ones goodbye. In the engine rooms, technicians pushed power plants to their absolute limits. On the gun decks, weapons officers loaded the most powerful ammunition in their arsenals. The Vex High fleet was a sight to inspire terror. Their ships were dark, angular things that looked more like weapons than vessels. They moved in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing light and giving back nothing but the faint glow of their engine exhausts. At the center of their formation was the Death of Worlds, the largest warship ever constructed. It was a mobile planet killer, armed with weapons that could shatter continents. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Vex High flagship," announced his communications officer. "Let's hear what they have to say." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the insectoid form of Supreme War Leader Zakth. The Vex High leader's compound eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction, and his mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. "Admiral Zethkar of the dying Kitherian Empire," Zakth's voice was like grinding metal. "I offer you one chance to spare your people unnecessary suffering. Surrender now, and I will make their deaths quick." "Counteroffer," Zethkar replied calmly. "Turn around now, and I'll let half your fleet escape before we destroy the rest." Zakth's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Zethkar recognized as laughter. "Brave words from someone about to become history. Your empire has grown weak, Admiral. You've spent so long playing diplomat and peacekeeper that you've forgotten how to wage war. Today you will remember, but it will be too late." "We'll see about that." Indeed we will. I want you to watch, Admiral, as we crack your precious homeworld like an egg. I want you to see your people's cities burn, to hear their cries for mercy that will never come. The age of the Catherian Empire ends today, and a new age of Vex-High dominance begins. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Well," said Lieutenant Yixtal, "he seems nice." Despite everything, Zethkar found himself almost smiling. "Indeed, all ships assume attack formation. We may be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched. The Vex-High think they know us, but they've never faced a Catherian fleet with nothing left to lose." The next 2 hours passed in final preparations. Ships moved into position, creating defensive lines around Kither Prime. The massive orbital defense platforms powered up their main guns, weapons capable of destroying entire squadrons in single shots. Fighter wings launched from carrier ships, their pilots ready to sell their lives dearly. And at the edge of the system, 12 unknown ships continued to watch and wait. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is now in extreme weapons range," reported his tactical officer. "They're beginning to deploy into attack formation." "All ships, this is Admiral Zethkar. Today we write the final chapter of our Empire's story. Let us make it a chapter worthy of our ancestors. All batteries, open fire." The space around Kither Prime erupted in brilliant light as hundreds of ships unleashed their fury. Energy beams lanced across the void. Missiles traced glowing paths between the fleets, and the first blood of the battle was drawn. The Vex-High returned fire with devastating effect, their superior numbers immediately apparent as twice as many weapons struck at Catherian positions. The battle for the survival of the Catherian Empire had begun, but in the outer system, something else was stirring. The 12 unknown ships had begun to move, accelerating toward the battle with purpose and speed that defied their small size. Whatever they were, whoever commanded them, they were about to enter the most important battle in Catherian history. And nobody, not Admiral Zethkar, not Supreme War Leader Zakath, not even the sophisticated computers monitoring the engagement, had any idea what was about to happen next. The battle raged for 30 minutes before Admiral Zethkar realized they were losing faster than even his worst projections. The Vex-High fleet had smashed through their outer defensive lines like they were made of paper. Already, 15 Catherian capital ships were nothing but expanding clouds of debris, and the enemy had barely taken any losses at all. "Sir, the Glorious Dawn is taking heavy fire. Her shields are down to 8%, shouted his tactical officer over the noise of explosions that seemed to shake the very fabric of space around them. "Tell Captain Nixval to fall back to the secondary defense line," Zethkar ordered, though he knew it would only delay the inevitable by minutes. The secondary line was already under attack from 3 different directions. On the main display, he watched Vex-High fighters swarming around a Catherian cruiser like angry wasps. The cruiser's point defense systems were overwhelmed, and one by one the fighters were landing killing blows. In seconds, another of his ships vanished in a ball of fire. "Admiral, we have a priority transmission from Captain Yurknon aboard the Shield of Honor," announced his communications officer. "Put him through!" Captain Yurknon's image flickered to life, showing a bridge that looked like it had been through a meteor storm. Behind him, Zethkar could see crew members working frantically to put out fires and repair damaged systems. "Admiral, my ship is finished. Engines are gone, main guns are offline, and we have hull breaches on 7 decks. But, sir, we still have our nuclear self-destruct charges." Zethkar understood immediately. "Captain, are you certain?" "Yes, sir. We're already dead, but we can take some of these monsters with us. Request permission to ram the enemy flagship." It was a desperate tactic, but in desperate times, desperate measures were all they had left. "Permission granted, Captain. May your ancestors welcome you with honor." "Thank you, sir. It has been an honor serving under your command." "Shield of Honor, beginning ramming run." The connection ended, and on the tactical display, Zethkar watched one of his best captains steer his dying ship straight toward the massive HFY flagship, Death of Worlds. The enemy saw what was happening and tried to intercept, but Captain Yurkanon had timed his run perfectly. The Shield of Honor slammed into the enemy flagship's shield generators at full speed, and both ships vanished in a nuclear fireball that briefly outshone Kither Prime's sun. The bridge crew cheered, but their celebration was short-lived. The Death of Worlds emerged from the explosion damaged but still very much alive. The HFY flagship's shields were down, and several sections showed signs of damage, but the ship itself was still operational and still very dangerous. "Sir, we're getting reports from all sectors. We've lost 40% of our fleet and the planetary defense platforms are being systematically destroyed," reported Lieutenant Yixtal, her voice strained with exhaustion and fear. Zethkar looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. Red icons representing destroyed Kytherian ships dotted the screen like drops of blood. The HFY were advancing on all fronts, and soon they would be in position to begin their bombardment of Kither Prime itself. "Sir, incoming transmission from Grand Counselor Velthara," announced his communications officer. The hologram of the Grand Counselor appeared, but she looked older than she had just hours ago. The stress of watching her empire die was taking its toll. "Admiral, what is your status?" "We've lost nearly half our fleet, Counselor. The enemy will be in bombardment range of the planet within the hour. I'm sorry, but we cannot stop them." Velthara nodded slowly, her ancient eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to weigh down her entire body. "Then it is over. 3,000 years of civilization, countless generations of progress, all ending in fire and darkness." "Counselor, perhaps if we evacuated the government, some of our people could escape to rebuild somewhere else." "No, Admiral. We are Kytherian. This is our home, and if we must die, we die here. But, Admiral, there is something else. Those unknown ships at the edge of the system, they're moving." Zethkar quickly checked his sensors. She was right. The 12 mysterious vessels had broken from their observation position and were accelerating toward the battle at an incredible rate. "What are their intentions?" "Unknown. They still haven't responded to any communications, but, Admiral, their energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever power source they're using, it's beyond anything in our databases." "Could they be more HFY allies coming to finish us off?" "I don't think so. If they were HFY, why hide until now? And their ships don't match any HFY designs." Zethkar studied the sensor readings. The 12 ships were small, perhaps a tenth the size of a Kytherian cruiser, but they were moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Their energy output was enormous, far too large for vessels of their apparent mass. "Sir, the unknown ships are broadcasting on all frequencies," announced his communications officer suddenly. "What are they saying?" "It's not words, sir. It's music?" Zethkar frowned. "Music?" "Yes, sir. Some kind of rhythmic sound pattern. It doesn't match any known communication protocol. Put it through the speakers." The bridge filled with a strange, pulsing rhythm that seemed to have multiple layers. There were high-pitched sounds, low rumbling beats, and something that might have been voices, though not like any voices Zethkar had ever heard. "What in the name of the void is that?" muttered Lieutenant Yixtal. Before anyone could answer, the 12 unknown ships did something that made everyone on the bridge forget about the strange music. They opened fire. But they weren't firing at the Kytherian fleet. Lances of pure energy, brighter than anything Zethkar had ever seen, reached out from the small ships and struck HFY vessels with precision that defied belief. Each beam found its target, despite the enormous distances involved, and each hit was devastating. A HFY cruiser simply vanished. One moment it was there, firing at a damaged Kytherian destroyer. and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Another beam struck a Vex-High carrier, and the massive ship split in half like it was made of soft clay. Fighter craft spilled from the wreckage like insects from a broken nest. A third beam hit a Vex-High battleship, and the entire vessel seemed to turn inside out before collapsing into a point of light that hurt to look at directly. "What kind of weapons are those?" whispered his tactical officer. Zethkar had no answer. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like it. These 12 small ships were destroying Vex-High capital ships with single shots, moving between targets with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vex-High flagship," announced his communications officer. "Put it through." Supreme War Leader Zakth appeared on the screen, but he looked very different than he had an hour ago. His compound eyes were wide with something Zethkar had never expected to see in a Vex-High leader: fear. "What are those ships?" Zakth demanded. "Who is attacking my fleet?" "I was about to ask you the same question," Zethkar replied. "They're not ours. This is some Kitherian trick, some new weapon you've been hiding." "I wish it were, but no. We have no idea who they are or where they came from." As if to emphasize the point, another beam of energy reached out from one of the unknown ships and completely destroyed a Vex-High heavy cruiser. The strange music continued to play on all frequencies, its rhythm seeming to match the tempo of destruction being unleashed on the Vex-High fleet. "Sir, I'm detecting massive power buildup from the unknown ships," reported his sensor operator. "Whatever they're about to do, it's going to be big." The 12 ships suddenly broke formation and spread out across a wide area of space. The music changed, becoming faster and more intense. Energy readings from the mysterious vessels climbed to levels that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Then, as one, all 12 ships fired at once. But these weren't the precise beams they had been using. These were something else entirely. Waves of energy spread out from each ship like ripples in a pond, but these ripples destroyed everything they touched. Vex-High ships caught in the expanding waves simply ceased to exist. In less than 30 seconds, the 12 unknown ships had destroyed over 100 enemy vessels. The Vex-High fleet, which had been advancing confidently just minutes ago, suddenly found itself in full retreat. Ships that had been preparing to bombard Kither Prime were now desperately trying to escape the mysterious attackers. "Sir, the Vex-High are falling back," shouted Lieutenant Yixtal in disbelief. "I can see that," Zethkar replied, though he could hardly believe it himself. The unknown ships pursued the fleeing Vex-High with relentless efficiency. Their weapons continued to reach out across impossible distances, picking off enemy ships one by one. The strange music grew louder and more complex, as if it were celebrating each victory. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the Vex-High flagship," announced his communications officer. This time, Supreme War Leader Zakth looked absolutely terrified. Behind him, Zethkar could see Vex-High crew members running in panic as their ship shook from nearby explosions. "This isn't over!" Zakth screamed. "Whoever you are, whatever species you represent, the Vex-High Collective will remember this. We will hunt you down and make you pay for this interference." "Good luck with that," Zethkar said calmly, though inside he was just as confused as the Vex-High commander. The transmission ended as another energy beam struck the death of worlds. The massive flagship's shields flared and died, and significant portions of the ship's hull were simply deleted from existence. "Sir, the enemy flagship is breaking up," reported his tactical officer. Zethkar watched in amazement as the mighty Death of Worlds, the ship that had been meant to destroy his homeworld, tore itself apart under the stress of trying to escape. The proud vessel that had led the largest invasion fleet in galactic history died not in glorious battle, but in panicked flight. Supreme War Leader Zakth's final transmission was a scream of rage and terror that cut off abruptly when his ship's command center was vaporized by another precision beam. Within an hour of their arrival, the 12 unknown ships had completely destroyed the Vex High invasion fleet. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. Where once there had been over 400 capital ships, thousands of support vessels, and tens of thousands of fighters, now there was nothing but debris and the fading glow of engine trails as the mysterious attackers moved away from the battlefield. "Sir, the unknown ships are moving toward our position," announced his sensor operator. Zethkar felt a chill run through his scales. These ships had just single-handedly annihilated the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy. If they decided the Catherian Empire was also a threat, there would be nothing anyone could do to stop them. "All ships, stand down weapons," he ordered. "Defensive posture only. Let's not give them any reason to think we're hostile." The 12 ships approached the Catherian fleet slowly, almost carefully. The strange music continued to play, but now it seemed gentler, less aggressive. As they drew closer, Zethkar's sensors began to pick up more details about the mysterious vessels. They were indeed small, but they were incredibly dense. The ships seemed to be made of materials that didn't appear in any periodic table he knew. Their power sources were completely alien, and their design followed no engineering principles he could recognize. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown ships," announced his communications officer. "The music? No, sir, this is different. It's in our language." Zethkar raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfectly accented Catherian. The voice was strange, somehow both melodic and mechanical, as if it came from a throat that had never been designed for speech. "Catherian Fleet. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy vessel Indomitable. Please respond." The bridge fell silent. Earth? Navy? None of those words meant anything to Zethkar, but the implications were staggering. There was another species out there, one powerful enough to destroy the Vex High fleet single-handedly, and they spoke Catherian. "Captain Chen," Zethkar replied carefully. "This is Admiral Zethkar of the Catherian Imperial Navy. On behalf of my people, I thank you for your intervention, but I must ask, who are you, and where do you come from?" There was a brief pause before the reply came. "We are humans, Admiral. We come from a small world at the edge of what you call the Milky Way galaxy. We've been watching your empire for some time, and we decided that today was a good day to introduce ourselves. Humans." The name meant nothing to Zethkar, but clearly it should. Any species that could build ships like these, that could destroy the Vex High so easily, was a force to be reckoned with. "Captain Chen, might I ask why you chose to help us? Our peoples have never met before." Another pause, and when the reply came, there was something like amusement in the alien voice. "Let's just say we don't like bullies, Admiral, and the Vex High were definitely being bullies today." 3 days after the battle that saved the Catherian Empire, Admiral Zethkar found himself in the most unusual diplomatic meeting of his career. The conference room aboard his flagship had been hastily modified to accommodate their guests, though honestly, no one had been quite sure what modifications would be needed for a species called humans. It turned out that humans looked remarkably similar to several known species, at least in basic body structure. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, and they breathed oxygen just like Catherians did. But there was something about them that was fundamentally different, something that made Zethkar's scales tingle with nervous energy whenever he looked directly at them. Captain Sarah Chen sat across from him at the conference table, flanked by 2 other humans who had introduced themselves as Commander James Park and Dr. Elena Rodriguez. They were small compared to most galactic species, but they carried themselves with a quiet confidence that spoke of immense hidden strength. "So," Captain Chen said, her voice carrying that same strange musical quality he had noticed during their first communication. "I imagine you have questions." Zethkar almost laughed. Questions? He had thousands of questions. "Captain, where do I even begin? 3 days ago, we had never heard of your species. Now you've single-handedly destroyed the most powerful fleet in known space and saved our civilization. How is that possible?" Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "Admiral, how long has your empire existed?" 3,000 cycles, as I mentioned before. And in all that time, how far have your people traveled? What's the maximum distance from your home world that Kitherian ships have reached? Zethkar thought for a moment. Our furthest colonies are perhaps 8,000 light-years from Kither Prime. Our most distant exploration vessels have reached perhaps 12,000 light-years. The three humans exchanged glances that Zethkar couldn't interpret. Commander Park spoke for the first time. "Admiral, our homeworld is over 200,000 light-years from here." The number hit Zethkar like a physical blow. 200,000 light-years? That was impossible. Nothing could travel that far. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical, not to mention the time it would take. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "No ship could make such a journey." Captain Chen smiled, and there was something predatory about that expression. "Admiral, 3 days ago, would you have said it was impossible for 12 small ships to destroy 400 capital ships?" She had a point. "How long did it take you to travel here?" "About 6 weeks," Dr. Rodriguez replied casually, as if she were discussing the weather. 6 weeks to travel 200,000 light-years. Zethkar's mind reeled, trying to understand the implications. That would mean their ships could travel at speeds that were literally millions of times faster than anything the Kitherian Empire could build. "Your technology is clearly far beyond ours," he said carefully. "Which brings me to my next question. Why haven't we encountered your people before? Why reveal yourselves now?" Captain Chen stood up and walked to the viewing port that looked out over Kither Prime. The planet was beautiful from this distance, its blue oceans and green continents reminding Zethkar of everything they had almost lost. "Admiral, humans have been aware of galactic civilization for about 50 of your years. We've been watching, learning, studying. Your empire, the Vexhai Collective, the Zilarian Federation, the Crystal Singers, dozens of other species and governments. We wanted to understand how things worked out here before we introduced ourselves. And what did you learn?" She turned back to face him, her expression serious. "We learned that the galaxy is full of bullies and victims, Admiral. Species that prey on the weak and governments that expand through conquest and intimidation. The Vexhai were just the latest example." Commander Park activated a holographic display that showed a map of the local galactic region. Red dots marked Vexhai territories, blue showed the Kitherian Empire, and other colors represented various other species and governments. "Over the past 50 years, we've watched the Vexhai conquer 14 different civilizations," he said. "They don't just defeat their enemies, Admiral. They completely exterminate them. Every man, woman, and child. Every city, every monument, every trace that those species ever existed." Dr. Rodriguez added, "We estimate that the Vexhai have been responsible for the deaths of over 200 billion sentient beings in the past century alone." Zethkar felt sick. He had known the Vexhai were brutal, but he hadn't realized the scope of their genocide. "Why didn't anyone stop them?" "Because everyone was afraid," Captain Chen replied bluntly. "The Vexhai had the biggest fleet, the most advanced weapons, and they had convinced everyone else that resistance was futile. Sound familiar?" It did sound familiar. It sounded like the same fear that had paralyzed the Kitherian Empire for years, preventing them from taking action against Vexhai expansion even as smaller species begged for help. "So, you decided to intervene. We decided that the Vex-High had become a threat to galactic peace, Captain Chen corrected. Humans have a saying, Admiral. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We decided we weren't going to do nothing anymore. And now? Zethkar asked. What happens now? Are you going to conquer us next? Replace the Vex-High as the galaxy's dominant force? The three humans looked genuinely surprised by the question. Dr. Rodriguez actually laughed, though it didn't sound mocking. Admiral, Captain Chen said, humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We have our own worlds, our own problems, our own goals. What we want is for the galaxy to be a place where different species can coexist peacefully, where strong civilizations protect weaker ones instead of destroying them. A noble goal, Zethkar said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. In his experience, powerful species always wanted more power. But surely you want something in return for your intervention. Commander Park smiled, and Zethkar was beginning to realize that human facial expressions were quite easy to read despite the species' differences. Actually, we do want something, Admiral. We want allies, friends, trading partners, cultural exchanges. The galaxy is a big place, full of wonders and knowledge and art and music. Humans are explorers at heart. We want to learn about other species, to share ideas and discoveries. We want to make friends, Dr. Rodriguez added simply. It was such a startlingly innocent statement that Zethkar almost didn't know how to respond. Here were representatives of a species so powerful they could destroy entire fleets with a handful of ships, and they said they wanted to make friends. Captain, I hope you'll forgive my skepticism, but in my experience, species with overwhelming military superiority don't usually seek equal partnerships. Captain Chen returned to her seat and leaned forward, her expression earnest. Admiral, let me tell you something about humans. We've been fighting wars on our homeworld for thousands of years. We've seen what happens when power is concentrated in the hands of those who want to use it for domination. We've learned, through bitter experience, that the only way to achieve lasting peace is through cooperation and mutual respect. Our greatest heroes aren't conquerors, Commander Park added. They're the people who stopped conquerors, the people who stood up to bullies, the people who protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Dr. Rodriguez activated another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be a star chart with hundreds of marked systems. Admiral, I want you to see something. This is human space. Zethkar studied the display. The marked region was enormous, easily 100 times the size of the Catherian Empire. How many worlds do you control? None of them, Dr. Rodriguez replied. I don't understand. These aren't human colonies, Admiral. These are independent worlds that have chosen to ally with us. Some are human settlements, yes. But many are alien species that ask for our protection or partnership. We don't rule them. Each world governs itself according to its own laws and customs. We simply provide defense and facilitate trade and cultural exchange. Captain Chen gestured to the display. There are over 300 different species in our alliance, Admiral. Some are more advanced than humans in certain areas, some are less advanced in others. But we all work together as equals. And you're offering the same arrangement to the Catherian Empire? We're offering friendship, Captain Chen said. If that leads to a formal alliance eventually, wonderful. If not, that's fine too. But Admiral, the galaxy has just become a very different place. The Vex-High Collective is gone. Their fleets are destroyed, their leadership is dead, and their territory is now up for grabs. Various species and governments are going to move to fill that power vacuum. Some of them might be better than the Vex-High. Some might be worse. Commander Park added. Humans would prefer to see that territory divided among its rightful inhabitants. The species the Vex-High conquered and enslaved. But that's going to require protection while they rebuild and guidance to help them establish stable governments. And you want the Catherian Empire to help with that effort. We want the Catherian Empire to lead that effort, Dr. Rodriguez corrected. Your people have a reputation for fairness and diplomacy. You've been mediating disputes and keeping the peace in this region for 3,000 years. You're the logical choice to help these liberated species rebuild. Zethkar felt overwhelmed. 3 days ago, his empire had been facing extinction. Now he was being offered a chance to help reshape the galaxy. Captain, this is a lot to process. I'll need to consult with the High Council. Of course. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. And if the High Council decides we're not interested in this alliance? Captain Chen shrugged, a remarkably casual gesture. Then we remain friends. We help the liberated species ourselves, and life goes on. Admiral, we're not here to force anything on anyone, but we are here to make sure that what happened to the Vexhai happens to any other species that thinks genocide is an acceptable form of expansion. Commander Park stood up. Admiral, there's one more thing you should know. Humans aren't the only species in our alliance with advanced military capabilities. We have allies who specialize in shield technology that can protect entire star systems, others who can manipulate gravity itself as a weapon, still others who can phase their ships out of normal space to avoid detection entirely. Why are you telling me this? Because word of what happened here is going to spread, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Other aggressive species are going to wonder if they're next. Some of them might try to form coalitions to challenge us. We want everyone to understand that the 12 ships that destroyed the Vex-High fleet were just a tiny fraction of what we can bring to bear if necessary. Captain Chen smiled, and this time it was definitely predatory. Bullies throughout the galaxy just received a very clear message, Admiral. Their days of pushing around weaker species are over. They can adapt to the new reality, or they can follow the Vex-High into extinction. Their choice. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering everything from trade agreements to cultural exchange programs to joint exploration missions. By the time the human delegation prepared to return to their ship, Zethkar's head was spinning with possibilities. As Captain Chen reached the door, she paused and turned back. Admiral, there's one last thing. Humans have been monitoring communications across this region for some time. We know that your allies abandoned you when you needed them most. We know that species you've helped and protected over the centuries suddenly found excuses not to assist you. Yes, Zethkar said bitterly. It was educational. The Nurathi High Command, for example, claimed their ships were engaged in critical defensive operations. In reality, they were hiding in their home system, hoping the Vex-High would be satisfied with destroying your empire and leave them alone. I'm not surprised. Captain Chen smiled, but there was something cold in her eyes. You might be interested to know that the Nurathi have just received a visit from one of our diplomatic vessels. Apparently, they're very eager to discuss providing immediate aid to help the Catherian Empire rebuild its fleet. And the others? Oh, they'll all be hearing from us soon. Funny how quickly people become helpful when they realize that their previous allies might not be around to protect them anymore. After the humans left, Zethkar stood alone in the conference room, staring out at the stars. In 3 days, everything had changed. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely, and at the center of it all was a species that claimed they just wanted to be friends. He thought about Captain Chen's words about bullies and victims, about the choice between adapting to a new reality or facing extinction. The Vex-High had chosen extinction, though probably not consciously. But what choice would the Catherian Empire make? What choice would the galaxy make? One thing was certain. The age of conquest and genocide was over. A new power had emerged from the depths of space, one that seemed determined to enforce a very different set of rules. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Admiral Zethkar found himself wondering what other surprises these humans might have in store for a galaxy that was only just beginning to understand how small and vulnerable it really was. The stars looked different now, less empty, more full of possibilities. And somewhere out there, 12 small ships patrolled the darkness, carrying a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The strong would no longer be allowed to prey upon the weak. The age of humanity had begun.